So, what is a two-dimensional array? Two-dimensional array consists of the numbers represented in the form of rows and columns. For example, in this we have three rows and three columns. So here it can represent 9 numbers separately into it. So what is the need of this two-dimensional array and how it is going to be differ from the original one-dimensional array, not a original one-dimensional array, with a one-dimensional array basically. So in one-dimensional array, if you see, so we have one row of numbers with many values like 2, 3, 4, 5, and you all know array have a name and it will be having these indexes. But what is the need of two-dimensional array over here is when we do a matrix calculation, we need the coordinates in points and we need multiplication and graphics and all those things. We use matrix calculations. So in those places we will be in need of this two-dimensional arrays. So this one-dimensional array racked one after the other represents a two-dimensional array. Like this. So here you can see this one-dimensional array. If I rack such a one-dimensional array one after the other, that frames a two-dimensional array. Fine. The representation of this array will also have a name like A, and it have the indexes separately for row columns like 0, 1 and 2. So the element at this particular column is represented as 0, 0, it's 0, 1, it is 0, 2, 0, 3. Likewise in the second row, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 0, and it keeps on goes like this. So what happens? The elements in these particular positions are being represented with two dimensions. One is with row, another one is with column. So every element will have two things. So every element will be represented represented in rows and columns. Say example. So in a two-dimensional array, for example, if I have 3 rows and 3 columns, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So if I want to represent any number like 1, so number 1 is represented as A of 0 and 0. So the first, this represents the row and this represents the column. So I hope this representation of 2D arrays everyone might have understood. If you have any doubts, you can just put it on a chat so that I can rectify it when I look at the doubt sessions. Fine. So let's see something more about this two-dimensional array. So when I want to declare a one-dimensional array, so I'll give it as int a of 5 and I give values as 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So here when I draw a one-dimensional array with 5 different elements like 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So here the numbers that I am writing at the top, these things are called as indexes, which plays a major important role. Okay, since the index and the number is same, I just add 1 in front of each and every number so we won't get confused later. Fine. So and it will be easy to call out a number so you won't get confused whether it is an index or an element. So the same two-dimensional array is being represented in form of rows and columns. So it will be a of 5. So let me take 3 and 3. So this says the number of rows in this two-dimensional array is 3 and column is two-dimensional array is also 3. So it has 3 rows and 3 columns. So now let us draw a structure with 3 rows and 3 columns. Fine. Here we have 3 columns and now comes the 3 rows. So the name of the array is A. And the indexes of the columns are 0, 1, 2 and the indexes of the rows are 0, 1 and 2. Fine. If I am going to give a value to it, so I can assign a value to it by giving an open brace. So each and every row has to be mentioned separately, like 10, 20, 30. This I am giving inside a bracket. So this represents the first row which has 3 values inside it and a comma. So now I am giving a second row value 40, 50 and 60. So this gives the second row value and the third row value goes like this: 70, 80 and 90. All the 3 rows has been over and now I am giving this close brace. I have to give a close brace at the last so that it's out of my area, so it's not having. Here there will be a close brace after this, like this. So I can give a semicolon. Now how these numbers are going to get arranged over here? The 10 comes in the first position, 20 followed by 30, 40, 50, 60 and all the numbers follows in this way, right? So this is just assigning a value inside a two-dimensional array. So comparison with the one-dimensional array, in one-dimensional array it has been represented like this and in a two-dimensional array it is represented like this. If you want to display any number in a one-dimensional array, then you will be giving like cout a of 2. So this a of 2 is going to give out the number 12. So 2 over here is the index. So if you want to represent any number in a two-dimensional array, then you have to give cout. Here you have two index. One index represents the row and another index represents the column. So I guess you all might be knowing the answer for this. If it is cout A of 20, the value would be 70, because the representation of 70 is second row, 0th column, so this is 2 row. So always you have to remember, in a two-dimensional array, the first index represents the row and the second index represents the column. Now, before moving on to the problems of how to do with two-dimensional arrays, I will let you know how to get the values of a two-dimensional array during the runtime. In one-dimensional array, when I get a value, so I declare it to one-dimensional array int a of 5, and here I use a for loop for int I is equal to 0, I less than 4, I plus plus, and here I give cin a of I. This gets me the value for a one-dimensional array during runtime. So in the same way, how to get a value of a two-dimensional array using a cin statement, and that is during a runtime. So here, before getting any value, I have to declare it. So I give int a of 3 and 3. And here I have one dimension, so I have used one for loop. Two-dimensional array, I have two dimensions. One is for row and another one is for column. So I will be using two for loops, one after the other. So int I is equal to 0, I less than 2, I plus plus, cin a of I and j. So for this j, I have to write another for loop int j is equal to 0, j less than 2, and j plus plus. Wait, let me erase this and write it a little bit clearly. Fine, this is 0, 1 less than 2, semicolon, semicolon. Fine. Now for the second for loop, int j is equal to 0, j less than 2. Oh, sorry. J less than 2 and j plus plus, and here I give cin a of I j. So the execution of this is very simple, as like one-dimensional array. For the first time, when I start executing it, of this loop especially, the value of I will be 0. So I is equal to 0, and the condition I less than equal to 2 is true. So what happens when a for loop is true? It gets into the body of the loop. So inside the body of the loop, I have another loop which is nothing but j is equal to 0, and j less than 2, the condition again is true. So what happens over here? Since this loop is also true, that means the second loop, this is also true, then it gets in the body of this second for loop is this one. So now a of 0 and 0, the value of this has been taken. So if suppose I give the value of this as 10, and here I would like to represent this two-dimensional array, so that whenever we enter a value, we can put that value inside this array and we can check it how it's all getting in. Fine. So you know the indexes of this and this. Okay, this is 0, 1, 2 and 0, 1, 2. the index of this particular element is 0, 0. Since the value of I and j is 0 and it is taking the values of a of 0, 0, the value which I have given over here will get into this particular position. Now, after executing this particular statement, it goes to j plus plus, because I have only one statement in the body of the loop. After this it goes to j plus plus. So now the value of j is being incremented after this, so j becomes 1. So when j is equal to 1 and j less than 2, the condition till remains the same. So what happens? Once the condition is true, again it gets back into the body of the loop, that is C in A of ij. So now the value of j has been changed, but I remains the same. The value of I remains the same, but the j has been changed because of this update expression. The j value has turned to 1. So A of, in the position of j, I give 1. So suppose if I give the value 20, the value 20 gets inside this element, because this is the position of 0, 1. So 0 represents the row and 1 represents the column. So always we have to remember, in any two-dimensional array, the first dimension represents the row and the second dimension represents the column. So what happens after executing these statements? So this, after executing this particular statement, it goes to j plus plus and the j value will be incremented to 2. So now again I have made a mistake here. It should be less than or equal to 2 and less than or equal to 2, since the index is 3. So since the maximum size of the array is 3, the index goes from I is equal to 0 to 2. Sorry, it's my mistake. So it should be j less than or equal to 2. So when the value of j becomes 2, when j is equal to 2, j less than or equal to 2, the condition becomes true. Again it gets back into this particular statement. It gets the value of a of 0, 2. The value of j has been changed, so this is 2. Now whatever value I give over here, it goes to 0 and 2. That is 0th row and second column. So 30 comes over here. Fine. So what happens after this? So now again the j value has been incremented. J is equal to 3. Now what happens? J is equal to 3. The condition becomes false. J less than or equal to 3. This becomes false. So once this becomes false, it get back to the outer loop. From here it go back here. That is I is equal to 1, because this loop fails because of the condition 3 less than or equal to 2. Now after terminating this loop, it goes to the outer loop, because till the value of I is 0, this outer loop is still valid and it didn't become false. So now once this loop get terminated, the value of I will be incremented to 1. So what happens when the value of I is 1? When I is equal to 1, it will check the condition again, like I less than or equal to 2. So the value 1 less than or equal to 2 is true. So now it gets back to the second loop, that is the inner loop again. So what happens? Again the j starts from 0, because it comes inside this. Once this is get true, it comes inside the body of the first for loop. The body of the first for loop have another for loop. It begins from the beginning, so j value becomes 0. So j less than or equal to 2, the condition remains true. Now a of ij, so this is a of ij. the present value of, that is the current value of I is 1 and j is 0. So whatever value I am giving to this cin statement at this particular values of I and j, the value will get over into this position, like that is 10, below that is 1 0 40, because the value of I is 1 and the value of j is 0. So this represents the row and this represents the column. So this goes to the first row and 0th column. First row in the sense the row indexing the value 1 and the row indexing the column indexing the value 0. Yeah. So likewise, now it will execute for 3 times. So what happens? So we know how this for loop executes. So now it will be again executing for 3 times, and when the j value becomes 3, this condition, this for loop is going to become false and it will go back to this for loop again. So when it go to this for loop again, I value becomes 2. I value becomes 2. So what happens? The condition remains true at that time. Again, this loop, when it is true, it get backs into the body of that loop, that is for int j is equal to 0. It's not I. Int j is equal to 0, and it start continuing this loop for next 3 times. So next 3 values for these row, that is 2 0. So let me fill up these values first, and when the value of I is 2, and it will give me the value for these things 80 and 90. So this is how the value has been taken for a 2-dimensional array. Most probably, if you understand the concept of this, how it is being executed and how the values of a 2-dimensional array has been taken inside this representation, most of the problems can be solved. So now let us take a simple problem and check. So let us take a problem like we have a 2-dimensional array . Like, and I have the value like 13, 14, 15, any value, random value 22, 26, 1, 5, 3, 2. So this is the 2-dimensional array. So here what I have to do is I have to find the sum of each row. Sum of each row. So now let us see how to solve it mathematically. So first I have to take out the elements from the first row and I have to add up all those things, that is 13, 14 plus 15. So it becomes 30, 30 plus 12, like 42. Then after printing, so my output, how it should look like. So the sum of first row 42. So after printing this, I have to go and find the sum of the second row, that is 22 plus 1 plus 5, which is nothing but 28. After finding out this value, then it has to print the sum of second row is 28. Now after printing 28, it will go and find the sum of the third row, that is 28 plus 3, which gives 31. So the sum of third row 31. So this is how my output has to be. So let us devise a method how to do it. So first I have to take out this row element and then I have to display it. So here when you see while operating with two-dimensional array, I have two for loops like for and for, and I have a statement over here. Now, so this for loop represents the row and this for loop represents the column. So when I'm going to, wait, let me erase this. I have two for loops like for, and I have set of statements. Okay, this for loop represents the row and this for loop represents the column. Now I have to take one row, and in that row I have to take three columns. For example, this 13, 14 and 15, these are all one row, right? So in this one row I have three columns. So when the I value is 0 and the j value has to go from 0 to 2. So this is the trick over here. So now when I consider, I know the second loop executes 3 times when the value of I is less than or equal to 2, when the value of j is less than or equal to 2. So it executes 3 times for one particular value of I. If I start with 0 and j with 0, so now when I'm executing it, taking I value as 0, it comes inside this and it takes j value as 0 and it executes this inner loop for 3 times unless this fails, so the I value is not going to change. So the part where I have to find the sum is over here. So this is the place where I am going to find the sum. So let us write a small program on it and I will explain it accordingly.